Hi, hello, how are you everyone? This is FlashBack with Wes Britton, and I'm Wes Britton, and you're about to hear an hour of celebrity interviews with folks from films, from TV, from music, from comedy, from old-time radio. We touch a lot of bases with entertainers from the past, present, and future. We're going to be telling you all kinds of stories with a lot of world experience and wisdom and all of the things that we know well in this generation. So stay tuned for FlashBack with Wes Britton.
Hi, this is Steve Stoliar, author of Raised Eyebrows, My Years Inside Groucho's House, and you are listening to FlashBack with Wes Britton.
I was trying to think of a plan to get Cass and Dennis on the show when I heard a knock at the office door. Come in. How do you do? Are you the lady of the house, or do I have smog on my glasses? After looking you over carefully, I hope it is smog. Well, Groucho Marx! Groucho, what are you doing out here in the desert? Desert? I've been sitting in the dressing room for 40 minutes. Some desert, all right. Selling mink coats. Here's a beauty, only $40. Mink coats for $40? How can you sell them so cheap? Well, I have no overhead. I don't advertise. I don't pay rent, and I steal the coats. Groucho, I know you don't steal those coats. Where do you get them? Very simple. I trap them with my big musical trap. I walk out into the woods and play seductive music on my zither. The little animals hear the music, do a striptease, and take off their furs. Did I tell you about the two vultures who were plucking in? Well, it's hard to do without two. Start working on the record now, fellas. Supply of wax. Would we be faded? Oh! That'd be the biggest crap game in history. Look, Groucho. I think it's your turn. I think, we have a hookup with Lee Francis, you know. Look, Groucho, I don't need a mink coat. I'm an etching man myself. Wait till I catch up on you. Over here. Oh, yes. Well, you wear one of my mink coats, you'll be etching. Well, we can cut that, too, I guess. Well, I suppose the girls would find the coat too warm out here in the desert. Well, I always find the girls are warmest when you promise them the coat. Once they get it on, they cool off. Not these coats, Bob. These coats are all hot. Hope this is some radio. I'll do as much for you, Bob. Thank you. This is some radio station here. What? What? Now, look, you're not going to suck me into an Abbott and Costello routine. With me playing Abbott. You get your own Chico. And why have you got this place hidden out in the desert? I started out last night and trying to find it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Well, where did you stay last night? In a haystack. Well, was it comfortable? No, I kept sitting on the needle. But I found out one thing. A needle always points north. Say, Groucho, excuse astronomer in the orchestra. We ought to work this way. They're much better here. Well, don't forget, they're getting paid. We're stealing. And don't forget, I'm getting paid. Groucho, excuse me a minute. I have to make an announcement on the air. Step into the studio with me, will you? You notice everybody in radio wears wooden shoes?
Well, hi. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's very special Flashback with Wes Britton. You know, one thing I've noticed of late, we touch a lot of bases here at Flashback, and I noticed that a lot of fans really, really like it when we go back to old-time radio, old-time comedy, back to the Giants. I'd see that because some of the posts or clicks I see on our Facebook page are from people who are listening to Jack Benny and Bob Ho show we did months ago. And folks, I appreciate that. Yeah, if you're online and you're at Facebook, do a search for Flashback with Dr. Wesley Britton and click on the likes. No quizzes, no questionnaires, and you can keep up with what's happening. Well, we're about to go into the realm of another giant from that period, which is why I said all that stuff. And that's with a guy, his name is Steve Stoliar. As you heard before, he's the author of Raised Eyebrows, My Years Inside Groucho's House. But he has lots of other people to talk about, too, one of which is Jeffrey Rush, and another of which, of all people, is Jimmy Plummer. And the reason I mentioned their names is, well, Steve, tell the folks, why did I bring those names up?
Well, you brought them up because they are champing at the bit to star in the film version of Raised Eyebrows, which is, it's beyond development. We have the script director, and Jeffrey Rush cannot wait to play the elderly Groucho.
Oh, my.
And Charlie Plummer will be playing me at 20 with a full head of hair and mutton chops. And then Sienna Miller as Erin Fleming, the difficult and volatile young actress who had become really in charge of Groucho's personal and professional life in his last years. So we're currently on the hunt for enough funding to get it going, and then we're off to the races, or the opera, depending on which market. So I'm jazzed about that, and I just learned that it is a long and winding road to try to get an independent film off the ground. But we have Oscar-nominated writer-director Oren Moverman, who co-wrote the script with me, and he's can't wait to direct it. And we've got a lot of good people attached to it, and I've just learned to be patient, that good things are worth waiting for. And I since we want the film to do justice to the book, it's been worth holding out for all of the viaducts to be in a row for it to happen. So, yeah, that's a strange and surreal thought, to be on the set of a movie based on something I lived through, having people play people I knew, including someone playing me as a college student. So it's like through the looking glass and back again a few times.
Well, it's been, 15 years since your book came out. Why now are you working on a movie from it?
Well, I have long wanted to do a film version of it, because it first came out in '96 in hardcover, and people said, have you thought of doing this? And it's like it has elements of Sunset Boulevard and Ed Wood, this young eager fan latching onto his hero in his final years. And there's been a lot of false starts. I tell people it's sort of like the lines at Disneyland. You're waiting all this time, and you feel like you're just about there where you get on the ride, and then you see that it loops around and throws you back in the opposite direction, all the way back to zigzag back to the front again. So it's not for the squeamish to, you don't just hammer out a script and then make a couple calls and then they make a movie. So there have been, the personnel has changed, and also, now we were dealing with the COVID shutdown and the strikes and all this stuff. So it's been quite a task to try to get this done. But I really, I have one handful of magic beans to trade for my cow, and I want to make sure it sprouts a healthy beanstalk. So that's the answer to that. Is for years people have said, what's going on with the movie? And it's like, I know, but it hasn't fallen through. It hasn't vanished. It's just, quite the task. I've written for network television. I've written episodes of Murder, She Wrote and Simon & Simon and the new KRP and other things. And that's a case where, you get an assignment to work for an ongoing TV show, and you work out the story in an outline and then turn in the teleplay, and then you get paid, and then they make it and show it, and they move on to another episode. You're flying solo initially with a movie, and then it's finding people that get it and want to do it. I remember very shortly after the hardcover came out, as I say, in '96, the one that's currently out has a new postscript chapter and a wonderful cover by Drew Friedman, who does great caricatures. But when the first printing came out, very shortly after that, my then agent said that there's a producer who wants to talk to you about maybe doing a movie. And I thought, well, that was easy. And gee, that's right hot off the presses, and already someone has wisely realized that there's a movie. I met with this producer I no longer remember who it was. The first thing he said was, if you think there's a movie in your book, you're mistaken.
Oh.
And I thought, why does this guy want to have a meeting with me if the first thing he's going to do is tell me I'm wrong? He said, you might want to use your story to sort of bookend a biography of Groucho Marx and all the Marx Brothers. In other words, begin with Groucho talking to you in his den, and then you flash back and show him. And it's like, no, you don't understand. Just as Ed Wood was not the Bela Lugosi story, where he's a big Broadway star and then Dracula and then falls on hard time, this is not that. This is the story of a young fan getting to know his hero in his declining years and having to contend with this volatile, mercurial, difficult woman who was, guarding the golden fleece. So that was an early experience with disappointment. Another along the way was a friend of mine said, I know a writer-producer who loved your book and wants to talk to you. Okay, so I meet with this guy, and he said, the first thing we'll have to figure out is whose point of view is the story told through. Now, the story, the book
yours.
is told through mine, and many, many people have said, I felt like I was right with you going through these experiences and the excitement of meeting your hero and the heartbreak of dealing with his fading out and the people, the personalities of the people. But this guy that I met with said, maybe it should be from the point of view of Groucho as an old man with the young Groucho imprisoned in his mind. And so you go back and forth between the old Groucho and the young Groucho in their perceptions of this young. And I thought, the ship has sailed from the dock before anyone is on board. I mean, I knew I was in for compromises, and I knew that you don't just write a book and then they change the margins and retype it into a screenplay and film it exactly. I understood from my years in the business that there's, all sorts of combining characters and having to cut stuff out and rearrange chronologies and things for dramatic purposes while still staying true to the story.
I would say worrying about legal issues, too.
Yeah, not so much, but yes, things to take into consideration when you're starting out. But here was a guy saying maybe it should be from the point of view of the old Groucho and I just thought, no, that's not it either. And the friend of mine who had arranged us our getting together said, I can't believe you said no without another possibility out there. You never do that. And my point of view was, this isn't about just getting something made from my book. It wasn't about the money or just to have something. I want it the way I want it and need to find a kindred spirit who shares that vision. And so I've been, holding out, and it's slowly the pieces come together. This is completely separate. Not completely separate. It's tangential, but it sounds like I'm going in a completely different direction. I'm friends with Woody Allen through Dick Cavett through Groucho. How's that for triple name dropping?
Well, I mean, yeah, I knew those guys knew each other.
Yeah. And we correspond with actual paper letters, believe it or not. And he types them on the same Olympia portable manual typewriter he used in high school. And on that typewriter, he typed the jokes that he would send to other comedians, his stand-up act, the first drafts of all of his films, all of his New Yorker pieces, pushed through the same machine that he still...
Amazing that machine survives.
Yes, and he said, recently he sent me a letter that said, I'm sorry for the delay, but typewriter repairmen aren't exactly plentiful in New York these days. But he said, I'm braver than he is to hold out for getting the movie done the way I want to see it done, instead of just going with a hint of a deal somewhere and saying, it's out of my hands and this is the way it goes, but at least I'll have something to show for it. He actually admires that I'm steadfast because I know that I'm running the risk that it might never
not
be
get
made.
done, yeah.
But anyway, but I digress, and quite well, as a matter of
fact. Well, I'm glad to hear about Woody Allen. I'm always interested to hear what's going on with him.
Well, not to completely diverge from this, but how do I do this in a short amount of time? I know for a fact that he is not a sexual predator, and yet he has been arbuckled, in a reference to the Fatty Arbuckle, arbuckled by the Pharaoh gang, and it is incredibly unfortunate, although I would say he's at the most content time in his life. So if Mia's plan was to destroy his life, she failed, because he has a loving wife and 2 adopted daughters that are very devoted. He has ample money. He has a jaw-dropping resume of
I would agree
films
with
that he has written, directed, starred in, all of his short pieces for The New Yorker and plays and all this.
He has a legacy.
He spends time with friends. He eats where he wants, and I mean, he has a very good life, and he has a very healthy approach to the fact that he's, closer to the end than the beginning. I mean, he's 88, and one of his letters he said, 88 is a perfectly fine age, particularly if you don't mind dying. And another one he said, now that I'm 88, what did he say? I have applied for dementia. as if
granted,
as if it's like Medicare. It's like, now I'm old enough to apply to lose my mind. So he's remarkably resilient, and I get much more hopping mad at the people who have judged him wrongly than he does, because he has accepted that there is a solid chunk of people who will always believe he's a monster, and that as with the Trumpers who will never let go of, the election was stolen in 2020, even though there is zero evidence of it, there is no convincing them otherwise, despite incontrovertible evidence. So we're different in that way, because if it were me, I would feel like stopping every stranger on the street and saying, hi, you don't know me, but let me explain to you what has happened. Through these circumstances, I have been falsely labeled, but because of these reasons, ABC, and instead he just It's like, well, all right, so I can't do that. Oh, all right, so I can't get funding to make a film in America. I'll make a film in France. I'll make a film in Italy. I'll write a play. I'll write my memoir. It's like he just goes around the rock in the stream. I would stand there ankle deep in the water, shaking my fist at the rock, saying, why are you preventing me from sailing through at this spot? So he's my I had grown up being a big Woody fan from Take the Money and Run on, seeing it at the theaters. And the fact that he has accepted me as a friend and has been super supportive. I mean, one of his letters, he said, let me know if there's anything I can do to help. Just what you need, an accused child molester. So, yes, he even finds humor in it. And my admiration for him has only grown as I have seen how he has weathered having become a pariah and seeing people wrinkle their noses when I bring his name up. And then as a peripheral thing, my late wife had been truly sexually abused growing up by her father and her brother, which had vast repercussions on her into adulthood. So if anyone could have been forgiven for assuming that where there's smoke, there's fire, and that Woody must be a predator, she knew that he didn't fit the profile. You don't have someone with a complete clean bill of health into your 50s, and then one night you do this thing once during a custody hearing and never again. And she also knew how frequently that's used as a ploy in a custody hearing to try to turn the judge against the father and all that stuff. So if my genuinely molested late wife knew that he was not the type, I really bristle at the armchair judges who sit back and say, you know, he should be imprisoned. Why is he allowed to make movies again, this horrible creature? And so, you know, I end up kind of typing myself hoarse, providing all sorts of hard and fast facts and information to try to offset the perception. But it's an uphill thing, but I don't see any reason why I shouldn't do it, even if I don't change a lot of minds, not because he likes my work and is a friend of mine, because if I believed for a second that he was guilty of it, that would have been it, because I knew from my wife the horrors that visits upon a child. And then there's all the misinformation about Soon Yi. He married his stepdaughter. No. He married his adopted daughter. No. He was a father figure while she was growing up. No. She was always Andre Previn and Mia Farrow's adopted child. He never even spent the night at Mia's house. He's great at compartmentalizing. She was not underage when they started going together, and she has said that he literally, that's a much abused word, speaking of abuse, he has literally saved her life by getting her out of the Farrow compound, because Mia's essentially nuts and abusive to the adopted children. She gave great freedom to the white children she adopted, and then the non-white children were basically servants who would be locked in closets and beaten. And I mean, it's truly unfortunate that she has emerged as this martyr victim person, when in fact she actually had Ronan's legs surgically, medically broken, I think twice, so that when they healed, he would gain an inch in height, because she was worried that he would grow up too short. So he spent months immobilized because of a doctor intentionally breaking and mending his legs. Anyway, It means a lot to me that he and I are friends, and I don't care if people think bad things of me because I know the truth. That's also what he said. He said, my ace in the hole is knowing I'm innocent. And I thought, no, in a Kafkaesque way, that would be the worst part. Because if deep down inside you know you did embezzle from the company or cheat on your wife or whatever the thing is, then you could only be so outraged. But knowing you didn't and being punished for it, to me, would be a nightmare. But to him, that's his ace in the hole. So, and that's all my stories about Groucho Marx.
A name we haven't mentioned in a half an hour. Actually, we haven't talked about Groucho much at all. Wait, we need to do that.
We should probably, he should at least make a cameo appearance.
Especially since the people came to hear us were waiting to hear about Groucho.
Well, but
tell me your favorite Groucho stories. If you could pick your top 10 moments, what would they be?
Oh, my God. You're asking me to pick snowflakes out of a 3-year blizzard. There were so many gratifying moments. There were, I was going to UCLA at the time and had recently switched from a history major to motion picture television. And in a TV production class, they divided us up into groups, and we were each supposed to do a short documentary. And I thought, oh, boy, I would love to take a camera into Groucho's house, but I don't know if I have the nerve to. And I thought, I've got nothing to lose, so I went and asked Groucho, and he asked what it would involve, and then he said, okay. And I thought, oh, my God, now I have to deliver. And it was just a remarkable experience with this small cluster of classmates and a Sony reel-to-reel black and white video.
I remember those.
Camcorder with an internal microphone, so there wasn't even a separate mic for him to have. And all we had was the available lighting in the living room. And he came shuffling down the hall and said, okay, Mr. Producer, let's get going. And I did a short interview with him, and I said, there's an election around the corner. And he said, which corner? And I said, well, just around the corner. And he said, you can't say just around the corner. It has to be as specific. And I said, well, anyway, there is an actor leaving leaving the governorship of California when Reagan was leaving.
Yeah.
And we talked about this, who do you like in comedy today? Me. Well, who do you like in what about movies? Movies? Yeah, they're good. They ought to make a lot of them. And he sang a couple songs, and then at the end, I said, I can't possibly thank you enough for letting me do this. And he said, sure you can. Don't take a salary. But it was just, the fact that he realized that I was a kindred spirit and that all these kids weren't just torn T-shirt wearing, long-haired, pot-smoking hippies listening to acid rock. That here was this 20-year-old kid that loved Robert Benchley and George Gershwin and appreciated one day he called me into his bedroom, and it was always so cool to hear, Steve. And it's like, wow, I never thought I'd get to meet this guy, and now he knows my name and he's calling me. And he had a $20 bill, and he said, go down to Tower Records and buy some records for me. You know what I like. And I thought, the fact that he knows that I know what he likes shows a bond.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm hesitant to say we were friends because I think that overstates it. In the case of Woody Allen, he sent me a copy of his memoir, and it said, for Steve, not just a great friend, but he does Franklin Pangborn, because Woody loves my impression. So if Woody says I'm a friend, I don't mind saying it, and it's not just because I stuck my head in a selfie and then tried to pass it off as my dear, dear friend. So I would say with Groucho, I was more than just an employee, but less than a friend. Maybe sort of like he was fond of me like a nephew sort of thing. That feels more accurate. But it was just an astonishing 3-year run. I mean, he had health problems before I got the job and was in his 80s, and I always thought this is going to end really at any time, and I will be grateful for whatever scraps I can get. And it turned into 3 years until he died in August of 1977. And I guess since we're talking about the back half of the story for those listeners, both of them, who
including my wife.
Yes, that's it. And even she's saying, "What else is on?" There was a movie called Animal Crackers. It still is, as a matter of fact.
Yes.
That had been made by the Marx Brothers at Paramount in 1930 based on their big stage success. And essentially through a clerical error, the copyright expired and the rights to the film reverted back to the authors and composers of the play, George Kaufman, Maury Riskin, Bert Kalmer, and Harry Ruby. So when Paramount sold their old films to MCA Universal in the late 50s, Animal Crackers was part of the package, but if they wanted to syndicate it to send around to TV stations or put it in theaters, they would have to shell out some money to untie the legal knot that had... And Universal just didn't think there was any purpose in spending good money on an old black and white Marx Brothers movie. Well, all of my friends were big Marx fans, and this was the great missing link, holy grail, because it was their second film, and the one in which Groucho played Captain Spaulding and did the joke about an elephant in my pajamas and all that. And, you know, also in these times of restored, digitally reconstructed, missing scenes, bonus features on the DVD thing, it's hard to realize there was a time when studios owned things but didn't care about them because to them it was just old stuff. And certainly having to spend current money on an old movie made no sense to them, even though all my friends thought, are you crazy? That there'll be lines to see this. So I started a committee at UCLA where I was a student, and we had a table on Bruin Walk, which is the long walk that most of the students have to go up to get towards the classrooms. And there would be tables with people with different causes: end the Vietnam War, legalize marijuana, gay rights, Hare Krishnas at the time. And then
all the stuff Groucho wouldn't support.
Yes. And Steve and his friends with the committee to re-release Animal Crackers. And so we had these petitions, and people were so skeptical. They said, do you have to be a registered voter? No. Is the government going to get a copy of these? I mean, this is during the whole Watergate.
Yeah, paranoia, yes, I remember.
Yes. And they couldn't believe it was just about that. And I managed to get in touch with Erin Fleming, the woman that was in charge of Groucho's life, and she arranged for him to come to UCLA and also for a lot of the press to be there. So there was this crush of students and crush of reporters with cameras and tape recorders and pens and notebooks, and these two chairs, one with Groucho Marx and the other with me, 19-year-old me, and my heart pounding out of the chest. And I said, Groucho, I am very happy to be meeting you after all this time. And he said, well, you should be.
Yeah.
Aaron Fleming said, "This is Steve Stoliar. He's the young man who's trying to get Animal Crackers re-released." And Groucho said, "Well, did you get it?" And I said, not yet, but we're sure working hard at it." And he said, "Well, you better or I'll fire you." And I said, "I didn't realize I was working for you. How much are you paying me?" And he said, "A little less than nothing." And I thought, pinch me now. What is this really happening? And they asked him all about, how the baby boomers have the young generation have embraced the craziness of the Marx Brothers and how they're hot again. And Groucho said, "Well, I'm very flattered by all the attention. Last Halloween, 3 kids came to the door dressed as Harpo, Chico, and Groucho." And I said, "What'd you give them?" And he said, "I sent for the police." So even though he was old and slowed down, that mechanism that made him Groucho was still there, which was very gratifying. So Universal relented basically to humor. We caused all this negative publicity, and they thought, fine, we'll figure out the legal snag, and we'll put it out in Westwood for you UCLA guys, and in New York, and then we don't want to hear another word about it. And it ended up breaking the house record at the UA Westwood that had been set several years earlier by the French Connection. And it was enormously gratifying to see long lines of college kids in tennis shoes and T-shirts and jeans waiting to plunk down their money, just as we knew they would, to finally see this classic Marx Brothers film. And so I was rewarded with this plum job. I had 3 summer jobs in 1974 that fell through, for which I remain eternally grateful.
Yes.
So I thought I have nothing left to lose, so I called Aaron Fleming and I said, "Is there anything at all that you think I might possibly kinda?" And she said, "Well, actually, I had been Groucho's secretary, but I'm his manager now, and because of all this new interest, I can't keep up with the fan mail, and we need someone who really knows their Marx Brothers to arrange all of Groucho's memorabilia, which will go to the Smithsonian." And I thought, oh, please, 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 please. And sure enough, I was paid money to drive to Groucho's house and work every day immersed in photos, letters, clippings, annotated scripts, posters, and my hero shuffling down the hall and stopping to talk to me. And I was always welcome at the lunch table. It wasn't like, no, you'll eat a sandwich in the kitchen, I'm having a famous guest over. I was always welcome, whether it was George Burns or Jack Lemmon or Steve Allen or no one, and it was just Groucho and Aaron and me, or Groucho and a nurse and me, and it turned into this 3-year gig that was just this dream, literal. Once again, the use of literal. It was literally a dream come true, because I used to dream about meeting Groucho, and they would be so vivid. And I remember one where I'm walking along and I see him, and I go up and I say, "Mr. Marx, would it be possible, do you think you could?" And he reached into his jacket and took out a cigar and gave it to me, because he knew I was trying to find the words to ask for. And then I woke up, and as the dream was dissolving, I thought, damn, it was so visual. I could touch it, I could see it, and I thought, I'm just never going to meet this guy. It'll just have to be this fantasy.
I think the universe had a different vibe for you.
They seem to have something else cooked up for me, and it changed my life. It changed my major from history to motion picture television. I realized how comfortable I felt in the company of writers and people that just could, speak amusingly and interestingly,
creatively.
Yeah, current events. And in fact, even in the halcyon days, like what Groucho was at MGM, it meant nothing to him to go to the commissary and eat with Clark Gable or Joan Crawford or Robert Taylor or Lionel Barrymore. He preferred the company of writers, even though they were in a sort of second-class room, their table, because he thought that actors were essentially vacuous for the most part when they didn't have other people providing them their dialogue. Now, obviously there were exceptions. I mean, he loved Jack Lemmon. There were a number of stars who, despite the fact that they were actors, were also brilliant conversationalists, and that was fine. But in terms of who he wanted to hang out with, it was the writers' table, because they were talking about current events and Hollywood gossip and making clever comments and sharing anecdotes, and that to him was stimulating, not hearing someone talk about their latest movie or something like that. And I felt this great kinship for Groucho's old friends, and as with Groucho, they were startled that I knew who they were. You know, I mean, I think their point of view was, you don't know who any of us Alta Cockers are, do you? And instead, my brain would flip to the Rolodex.
Oh, yes, we do.
And I would say, yes, you're Nat Perrin. You worked on Monkey Business and Duck Soup. You're Irving Brecker. You wrote at the Circus and Go West. And it was like, wow, this kid's all right. And so I realized that I don't really know what I would have done as a history major. I guess,
then and now, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it's like that was hardly a road paved with gold, the fabulous riches or something. But I always thought that my passion for old movies and old comedy was a great hobby. You're not going to make any money at it. And
guitar's all right, John, but you'll never make a living at it.
What is that from?
John Lennon's Aunt Mimi.
Oh, right. Okay, well I'm in an age now when everything triggers a story.
Yeah.
A friend of mine some years back had lunch with Ringo, and Ringo was telling him about when it was official that the Beatles were going to break up, and he wanted to call his mother and let her know so she didn't hear it over the radio. So he called her up and he said, "Well, Mom, it's true, the boys and me, we're finally going our separate ways." And she said, "Maybe you could go back to playing some of the local clubs around town." That a typical parent.
Yeah, that's the typical mom, yeah.
You're out of a job. I mean, he was, permanently, fabulously wealthy, but she could only see it as, oh, you need a job, do you? Well, maybe you could, I saw a sign in the window at the pub that they need someone to scrub the floor. But, that's so typical. And yeah, it's like John's aunt. So.
Where did all that start from? I have forgotten.
Switching to motion picture television and the gravitational pull.
Oh, that Groucho felt for writers.
Groucho's atmosphere, yeah. It was just such a rich atmosphere to work at, even though my hero was fading out and I was having to deal with this volcanic personality in Aaron who didn't.
By the way, I thought that was a deft bit of dancing in your portrayal of her. And I was really gratified to see she got her comeuppance at the end.
Well, when I set out to write the book, which I didn't, I set out to write an article because I didn't think I'd have enough for a book. I thought maybe if I cull some of the best stories, I might have a Esquire or Vanity Fair. And then I realized I had a lot more to say. I know this comes as a great surprise to you.
No,
I had a lot more to say. And then I worried, which is something I'm really skilled at, I worried that I'd have something too long for an article and too short for a book. I'd end up with like 63 pages, and then what do you do with it? But, luckily there was a book in me. And so, but when I set out to write it, I realized I could, if I want, crucify the people I didn't like and lionize the people I did and leave out the positive attributes of the villainous people and the negative attributes of the heroic. But I didn't want to do that because I wanted it to be accurate, and my feeling was, I may be kidding myself, but I think the events and the people as they unfolded are interesting enough without having to embellish it by either inflating my importance in the household or painting caricatures of the people. So half the people I talk to say, you were awfully hard on Erin Fleming. I mean, she gave you the job, and Groucho liked having her around, and I don't know.
Well, I don't know if you could say you were hard on anybody. You're just saying what happened. You know.
Well, the other half of the people say you were much nicer to Erin than you needed to be. You know, she was verbally and emotionally abusive, and it's like, you know, one of the themes in the book is the color of truth is gray. Things are rarely black and white, and you know, you can't just say that Erin was this awful Cruella de Vil, because Groucho's children didn't really want to be responsible for their elderly father as he was getting hazier, and he didn't want to be put in, quote, a home. And his last wife had left him in 1969, and Erin was devoted to him, but she was mentally unbalanced and ambitious, and I don't think she ever accepted that he was a mortal, and that she thought that if she yelled loud enough it would shake the rust off of his brain and he'd be younger again. And it's like, you know, this is, you know, he may be a living legend and a superstar entertainer who conquered vaudeville and Broadway and film and television, but he's this 86-year-old man who's had strokes and bad arteries and blood pressure and stuff, and you can't scream and make him shake in fear because you're having one of your tantrums. So I tried to be fair, and
I thought you were very balanced and level-headed. Level was the word I thought.
Thank you. Yeah, here was what an interesting side note is that the people I wrote about who were still alive and got back to me on it, they said, you have an uncanny memory for details after all these years. I couldn't believe you got everything right except what you said about me. It was an interesting through line with the people. It's like, yes, that is exactly how that party went. Yes, that is exactly what he was like. But when you said that that's not really how it happened, or that wasn't really how I was. But then other people would corroborate the stuff that I said about the people who said you weren't right, and then they'd say, however, in chapter 37, when you said that I had this party, it's not the way it happened. So I gave it my best shot, and I'm pleased with it. And
well, I'm thinking you've got to have a very clear memory of it, because those were very impressionable years for you. You were dipped into nirvana. Well, hell yeah, I think I remember every minute.
And there was a friend of mine that I met during my Groucho years, Jay, and he recorded an interview with me about a year or two after Groucho died, because he was putting out a little newspaper about the Marx Brothers, and he wanted to interview me for it. And I recently listened to the original interview from like 79 or 78, and I realized that my stories haven't really changed in 50 years.
Well, they really shouldn't.
Or the way that I tell them. You know, I think there's such a tendency to embellish and, oh, that's right, I got that wrong, or, oh, I've added this over the years. but you could cut and paste a transcript of that, and it would sound like an interview I recently gave. So I guess attorneys would think that I was a good witness because I have a consistent story, or the police wouldn't be suspicious of me because I don't give varying accounts of what happened.
Well, another old-timer we haven't touched on yet and should is Mr. Dick Cavett, who wrote the intro for your book, right?
He did. Well, Dick Cavett was one of the great side benefits of my Groucho experience because in the mid-'70s, Dick Cavett and his former college Yale roommate Christopher Porterfield wrote a book called Cavett, which is basically a running interview between the two of them. And the dust jacket blurbs for Cavett were from Groucho and Woody Allen. Mm-hmm. And Groucho was sent a couple of copies of it, and he came shuffling into my office at the house one day and said, "Read this, you'll enjoy it." And at the time, I thought, well, I'm not really a fan of Dick Cavett's. I appreciate him, but I don't make a point of watching. But Groucho's going to ask what I thought of the book, and I don't want to say, oh, I never got around to it. So I took it home, and from like the first page, I thought, oh, this guy is a kindred spirit. We have so much in common. Shy around girls. We lost our mothers when we were young. The awkwardness of having a stepmother. A passion for the classic comedians of the 30s. And I thought, I bet if we ever met, we'd hit it off. But what are the chances? Because he's one of those New York snobs. And I'm just this kid in Tarzana, or going to college. But there was something in Cavett's book where he talked about meeting Groucho and jotting down words to remind him of stories that Groucho told him. And in the book, Cavett says, I don't know what some of them mean now, for instance, and he mentioned a couple. And I thought, I think I know what those are. So I stole his address out of Groucho's little black book and wrote him a letter saying I'm working for Groucho, and he gave me a copy, and I loved it. And you said that you didn't remember, and I think it might be these. And I got this letter back that said, Dear Steve, you were uncannily on the nose with your two guesses. This is hasty as I'm about to leave to go to London, but write again, and I will answer again and better. And that began
another example of your memory.
Yes. That continues to this day, that he's been like a big brother, not in the George Orwell sense. And he gave me my big break when, after Groucho died, I became a secretary at Universal Studios, but I kept in touch with Cavett, and he hired me to move to New York to write for him at HBO, and that's when my life took another interesting zigzag, and going from secretary to writer from L.A. And
that's right. Dick Cavett just never goes away. He's still around, isn't he?
He is 87.
Oh, my heavens.
And it's semi-retirement, but we stay in touch. And it just, when I would write him letters while I was working for Groucho, he wanted to know about all the intrigue going on between Aaron and Groucho's son Arthur, and lawsuits and all this intrigue. And then when Groucho died, I thought, well, I guess that's it for my pipeline to Cavett, because there's no longer the inside story on what's happening at Groucho. And instead, he called me the weekend Groucho died and said, listen, just because Groucho's gone, I hope we're not going to lose touch. And by the way, I hope you don't mind, but I've shown some of your letters to Woody, and he says they're very well written. And I had to shake the urine out of my shoes.
Yeah.
The 1-2 punch that he is saying, please don't let go of me as a friend, and I hope you don't mind, but I've shown your letters to Woody Allen. So, and then the 2.5 years I spent in New York were just a wonderful, just all sorts of adventures, walking around the city with Cavett and working on different things, and meeting Katharine Hepburn and meeting Woody because of Cavett, and it was a wonderful time. And it's just because work dried up there, and then I got a really solid offer to write for a show out here that I very reluctantly moved back from Manhattan to California, because my friends out here were saying, how long are you going to live? How long is this for? And I said, you don't understand. I am moving to New York. This is not a visit of some sort. And I would have been content to stay there if I'd been able to keep money coming in. And I remember the Beacons movers when I was moving from L.A. to New York saying, wait a minute, you're moving to New York. They had never met anyone that would move from L.A. to New York. It was always in the westward direction.
Oh, well, I was asking about Cavett. Your son's semi-retired? What's the semi part?
Well, I think if some offer came his way, he would entertain it. But I think he's moved from New York to kind of an estate in Connecticut, and his first wife died, and he's remarried very happily and lives comfortably. And I think, again, he will be 88 in November, just as Woody will be 89 in December, which blows what's left of my mind. People will say, like, Dick Cavett should have a show again. They should put the Dick Cavett show on again. And it's like, well, it's run by younger people who keep talking about we need to move in a new, exciting direction. And it's like the game has changed, and so...
Well, and Dick's show was of its time, and it was for us.
Yeah. So he'll show up as a guest or something, but it's, sort of a pipe dream to think that some network is going to hand over...
Oh, I wouldn't wish that on him at that age anyway.
I don't even know that he'd want the rigors of it at this point, to put on a show once a night or week or whatever it is.
No, let him be.
Happy. Huh?
I said, no, let's let him be. And Woody, too, for that matter.
Yeah, Woody said, life is like a game show now where I wake up and which part of me will be aching? Oh, my ankle. Oh, my sinuses. And then he said, my recommendation to you is that you skip 88 entirely.
So, what problem were you feeling then? Not but 70.
Yeah.
Well, any final thoughts you want to do to wrap all this up? Because we covered a lot of territory in a short amount of time.
It was a pleasure. You just sort of plugged me in and hit the on switch. I feel like you haven't said very much, but... Well,
that's the point.
Oh, well, then I've succeeded.
Yes.
Drowning you out. Well,
I'm just the ringmaster, and you're the circus.
That's it. Jumping through your hoop. Raised Eyebrows is available on Amazon in big surprise that I did the audiobook myself.
No.
And also in Kindle. And if anyone would like to get a signed or personalized copy of my Groucho book, they can order it directly from me at www.stevestoliar, STOLIAR.com, and I will be happy to provide it. And in the meantime, I'm just riding this roller coaster of the transition from book to film, and everyone connected with it has High Hopes and other Frank Sinatra songs.
And folks, if you hop by his website, there's an awful lot of entertaining things there, because this guy does not settle down. He's always on the radio or podcast or somewhere.
I need to be medicated, I think. Well, this was a pleasure, Mr. Wes.
Well, this was a pleasure, Mr. Stoliar. Thank you for coming by, Flashback with Wes Britton.
Well, we hope you enjoyed tonight's exciting episode of, well, to quote the Firesign Theater's Phil Proctor, Flashback.